Hello, beautiful creative people. Welcome to another episode of How to Art Journal Interviews. I'm your creative tour guide, Kiala Givehand. This is a very special edition of the interview series where I talk with author, coach, and speaker, Omkari Williams. This segment is special because Omkari is not an art journaler, but what she does in the world is important for those of us who are. We use our art journals to heal, to transform, to journey within, and to speak our truths in the world that often tells us to stay quiet. The work Omkari does can help us stand more firmly in our truth by being seen, telling our stories, and allowing love to fuel the way we navigate the world. Omkari is a speaker, she's a coach, and she's a writer, and all of this is around the power of story in our individual and collective lives. She helps women birth their stories into the world. She believes our stories matter so deeply because they are multi-layered and bring powerful wisdom to our world. Omkari wrote a book called The Playbook, Creating the Life You Want. It's a guide designed to get you envisioning the life you really want to live. And of course, I love it because it's filled with journaling prompts and colorful, fun ways of looking at various elements of your life. Okay, enough of me gushing. Omkari and I are both living in the southern state of Georgia, so we recommend grabbing a cup of sweet tea or lemonade, then joining us out on the porch for a chat. See you there. Omkari, thank you so much for allowing me to interview you and chat with you today about your amazing book. And all the beautiful work that you're doing in the world. So thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. So I know you get this question from everyone. I'm sure you do, but I'm going to ask it too. I want to know, as I sit here with this beautiful book in my hands, and it's just so beautifully done and beautifully thought out. The prompts are very thoughtful. I want to just know, what was the inspiration for the book? I kind of know your story a little bit, but I think for those that are new to you and haven't heard it yet, it would be beautiful for them to hear what inspired this book.
Well, first off, you're right. Everybody asks me that question, and it's a very reasonable question. The answer is, the inspiration really was my clients and some of my friends. My clients would say to me, well, in between coaching sessions, how am I going to keep this going? What should I be doing? What should I be working on? And my friends would say, I know that you're not actually coaching me, but I'm your friend, so would you just tell me what to do? So that was kind of it. You know, one day I thought, well, I'm just going to sit down. I'm just going to write out a few answers and just, hand them out to people. Here, take this. And it just expanded from there. And all of a sudden, one day I thought, oh, this is not a cheat sheet anymore. This is becoming a book. And that really changed the whole dynamic. It made me think about it really differently. And I have to say, the artwork, none of it is mine. And I am so grateful for the talent of other people, because that's not something I could have accomplished myself.
Yeah. No, you know what? I think it is there's so many nuggets of wisdom in that story you just shared, because for a lot of people who are coaches or do the kind of work where they work with people one-on-one, we're always saying the same thing to people, like different person, different situation, but similar strategy or technique or thing you can do to move yourself forward, right? So what a beautiful testimony for why some of us need to be writing books, right?
Exactly. So now I'm waiting for yours.
Don't do that. But again, I think, there is that moment of, I keep hearing myself say the same thing over and over, right? Such a beautiful way to then go from, I love that language, going from a cheat sheet to this is an actual book. And then I think the other beautiful nugget in there is the gifts of others, right? You said you didn't do the artwork in here and you're thankful for the gifts of others. And so often we think we have to do it all ourselves. And so that is such a beautiful, little permission slip you just gave us to get a little help if we need to. So thank you for that.
Oh, to me, there's sort of no way to do something like this by yourself. And just recognizing that from the outset and asking people for their help makes all the difference. I mean, it really, collaboration is such a lovely experience. And I am so grateful to the people who collaborated with me on this. And yeah, it made it fun in a way that it wouldn't have been fun if I'd been trying to do this all by myself.
Yeah, I love that. Fun. Collaboration brings an element of fun. Absolutely.
It does.
Yeah.
It definitely does.
One of the things I really love, I love a lot of things about this book, but one of the things I love is the subtitle, Creating the Life You Want. Can you talk a little bit about how the book helps people create the life they want?
Yeah, I think one of the things we often don't recognize is that it's very easy to just go through our lives kind of by rote. You know, we get up at the same time, we do the same things, we have this routine, and literally years can go by and you don't recognize how much time has passed.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was living in California, I experienced that because the weather was always kind of the same in Southern California. And all of a sudden, one day I woke up, I'd gotten there in January. I woke up, it was September, and I thought, holy moly, how did that happen? And, you know, I had no external clues. And I think often in our lives, we lack external clues, so we don't notice the passage of time. And when we don't notice the passage of time, we don't recognize that we're just sort of on automatic pilot. And so that the things that we actually want, we haven't put them in place in our lives. We haven't said, this is actually what I want. We haven't thought about it. Or even if we have thought about it, we haven't made a plan. So a lot of what the idea behind this book is to give people a way to make a plan, not a plan that is so rigid and set in stone that it doesn't allow for any flexibility or just things happen. But you need to know where you want to go if you're going to get anywhere. Yeah. When I was in acting school, my acting teacher said on the very first day of class, I'll never forget this, he said, you can't even get home if you don't know where you're going. Yeah. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's true. You know, if I'm standing on the corner in Manhattan and I don't know that I want to get home, I'm going to be standing on that corner for a while.
Yeah.
So for the creating the life you want, it's a roadmap. It's here's where I want to go and here's how I can get myself there. Mm-hmm. And looking at the whole picture too, because it can't just be here's where I want to go in this really narrow little frame. There's got to be more to it, or you're never going to feel really satisfied.
Yeah. I love that, the idea of it being a roadmap, but also this moving us from, I like to talk to people and say, the goal is to move from being a spectator in your life to being an active participant. And that's kind of what I hear you saying, is it takes us from just kind of going with the motions, doing the things we do every day that we can kind of probably do in our sleep, which means maybe we're not all the way awake, right? So I think that this beautiful way of, and just for those of you that haven't seen the book yet, but I highly recommend that you get your own copy and don't try to look at my copy. They're just some beautiful, to me, the journaling prompts are a great point of reflection and awareness. For me, that's what journaling does. It makes me aware of things that I might not have been aware of before, things that were just kind of playing, like you said, playing on repeat in my life, in my mind, in my heart. So I love that. I love that this can be, and I love the title, The Playbook. It just feels like such a great guiding moment.
Yeah, I really wanted people to enjoy it. You know, I didn't want it to be this slogging, hard thing that you were dragging yourself through, you know. I wanted it to be something that was fun because, I mean, look, all of life is not going to be fun, and it shouldn't be. Yeah. But there should be an element of joy in our lives. And I think for so many of us, that element is really such a small piece. And we feel like planning ahead is this really serious, you can't have any fun, you can't enjoy yourself moment. And I think it should be exactly the opposite. Because if we're looking to plan our lives, we're looking to plan lives that have more joy in them, not less joy. Yes. So you should enjoy the process. The process should be joyful.
Yes, please. More joy. I'll take some of that. So in the book, towards the back, I think maybe even in your bio, you say, sharing our stories helps heal the world.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that, because I know that that's also your platform for women. And so we'll talk about the idea of women specifically sharing their stories, but just talk a little bit about how you think stories can help us heal the world.
I think that we're in a world where, even though we're very connected because we have the internet, that lives on a sort of superficial level quite often. You know, we all have our friends on Facebook, and some of them, honestly, we wouldn't know if we bumped into them on the street. They're sort of, you know, they're friends, but they're not friends of our heart in that deep way. But what we do share with those people is we share common human experience, and we share our longings and our fears and our desires for a better life and a more joyful life. And when we hear people's stories, it bridges the gaps between us. And those gaps are the places where I feel like the world is broken. It's those gaps that make us think of, you over here with what you want has nothing to do with me over here with what I want. And the truth is, we probably want the same things. We may approach them different ways, but when you can recognize that someone also, they want their children to be healthy, they want, you know, they want to not worry about their financial security, they want to be able to just live without fear. We all want that.
Yeah.
And when you recognize that we share those longings and dreams and goals, excuse me, then it's a whole different experience. You don't see them as the other, you see them as part of the human family, which includes you.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we heal the divisions between us. We look at the commonalities rather than the places where we might be really different.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. The gaps are where the world is broken. Wow, that I'm going to quote that. Can I quote that? Okay.
Absolutely.
I love it. So then let's move that to looking specifically at women, because I know most of the work you do is with and around women and their stories. And so I'd love for you to share why you think it's so important for women specifically to speak up and share their stories.
So women are half the world, or a little more actually, and yet our stories are nowhere near half the stories. And women's stories have a very specific kind of wisdom. You know, I think that I literally believe that it's sort of a biological imperative. You know, men went out and they hunted down the woolly mammoth, and that made them have to be very narrowly focused, or they were going to be lunch for the woolly mammoth.
Right.
But the women were there making sure that all of the children survived so that they could continue populating the earth, and they could help with the house and the farming and all of these things that were not woolly mammoth specific. So we have this broader view of things. And I think you need both. You need the focus, but you need the breadth as well. And when you only have one, then you're making decisions with half the wisdom of the world. You would never, ever in your life go out and say, well, here, let me think about this. I'm going to take half of what I know and throw it out before I make a decision.
Right.
But that's what we do. You know, when we don't have women's wisdom, we're making decisions based on half the information. And the other piece of that is that women were often told that our stories are silly or don't matter or, you know, less important, because they do tend to be more heart-centered than, you know, up here. But we need both. Again, we need both. And so I really want to encourage women to value their stories for themselves and for others, and to get those stories out and let those stories become part of the decision-making process and part of how we do heal the divisions in this world.
Yes, I love that. We only have half the wisdom. That is a very powerful statement, a very powerful paradigm shift, I think, too, for a lot of people to recognize and own the fact that we need both, like you said. So when you do this work with women, how do you help them connect to their stories, but also how do you help them build their confidence? And maybe this is two separate questions, but how do you help them connect to their stories to get to the place where they can then share those stories and build that confidence around sharing? Because some women have very traumatic stories that are heartbreaking, gut-wrenching. So how do you get them to a place where they can connect to the stories and then also feel confident enough to share them?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
The first piece, the connecting to the story, often women don't even recognize that they need to connect to their own story. Something has happened, especially with the traumatic stories. They will put that story in a box and shove it in a metaphorical closet. It's just not going to live there.
Right.
But what happens in my experience is those really difficult stories in particular, they'll keep raising their ugly head over and over and over again. It'll be the story you can't let go of in some way. It'll be the story that will wake you up in the middle of the night. And so those stories are the ones that really need to be brought into the sunlight, because sunlight is healing and cleansing. So I ask the women I'm working with to just write down the general thing that the story's about as a start. It's like, let's just write it down for yourself. Take 2 minutes even and just write down, this story is about this thing. Mm-hmm. And then I ask them to just really gently and slowly go at their own pace and start filling in the details. And they don't even have to share it with me if they don't want to. Mm-hmm. I just want them to be able to recognize that the story is there's the event that happened, and then there's a story we write about it. And those two are not necessarily the same thing. Mm-hmm. And that when you can separate out the event, just that, it's like that show, what was it, Dragnet, only the facts, ma'am? Just the facts. Yeah. And then how we feel about it, what we think that means, that's our story. Mm-hmm. But when you start to just separate out the facts, it gives you a little bit of space. And also, as you start to separate those facts out and you start to be willing to speak a little bit about your story, whether it's to a large group or a small group or just your best friend, you start to hear me too, or I know someone who that happened to as well. And that isolation piece that really keeps us like this, just constrained, starts to dissipate, and you start to recognize, oh, I'm not the only person in the world who's experienced whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And in that connection, there's so much healing.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes to all of that. Especially the part about when we start to tell our stories, we start to hear other people nodding and saying, see them nodding and hear them saying also, me too, that's happened to me. And so, wow, I'm thinking for a moment here about the times I've been in circle with women when I have heard them telling their stories and I could see myself in them, or I could see my mom or my aunts, or the women who were really close to me. And I began to soften to some of the pain that the women in my family or the women close to me have experienced that maybe I was judging them for at some point. When I see it through someone else's eyes, I'm like, oh, wow, that's what my aunt is going through or went through, or right. So it creates this compassion also for others in the world who are going through things that are similar to what we've seen or experienced in our lives. And so, wow, what a wonderful thing. So as you start to do this work with women, in a little bit, I'm going to ask you, like, how can women connect and be able to work with you and do this, dig in and dive into telling their stories and showing up. But first, I want to go to that idea of showing up, because for a lot of women, that part is the first step, to show up to a place where I can share my story. Whether that means showing up to your desk and writing on a blank piece of paper, or that means showing up to a live event where other women are going to be. But there is that step, that idea of being seen, visibility. So I want to talk about that a little bit, because I know that is also some of the work you do. You help women with this idea of what it means to be seen, to be visible in the world. And obviously that can look a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. So I would love to hear maybe your visibility story, and why visibility is even something you focus on in your work. Why is that a necessary element?
Yeah, I think it's a little complicated because I totally agree that it is essential that we allow ourselves to be seen, because if we're not seen, we cannot be loved. People cannot love us if they don't see us. But it's scary because it means you have to be vulnerable. I mean, for me, my story is, it's crazy because part of my story is that for 15 years, I was married to a really nice man. Mm-hmm. And he's a good guy, and we enjoyed being together, and there were lots of things about our life that were really good. And at some point, I realized that I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy the way I would want my clients to be happy. And I had to start to think about that. And eventually I realized this marriage is not for me. This is not the place I need to be. I was not living in the place I needed to be living in. I was living in a tiny town in upstate New York, which was gorgeous and had absolutely nothing to do. And, that's a dangerous thing for me. That is not what you want for me. Right. And eventually I decided to leave the marriage, and I moved to Savannah, where I live now, and met this woman whom I fell head over heels in love with and eventually married. And if I look back, I probably could have seen that coming, but I didn't see it coming at the time. Right. And so, I don't expect that the women I'm working with are going to leave their marriages and get married to a woman. I don't expect that. Right. But we all have these pieces of ourselves that we keep hidden, often from ourselves. I mean, I probably knew I was gay, but I was just not ready to share that. And even with myself. And that meant I wasn't seeing myself. I wasn't letting other people see me. My connections were not as deep as they could have been. And that's just no way to live, and so now my life is just very different. I mean, I have more friends because I'm less guarded. And the relationships with even some of my long-term friends are even deeper because I'm even less guarded with them. And these are women I've known, some of whom since I was 16, and we're really close. But still, if you're hiding any part of yourself, then there's always going to be that little veil between you and the world. And it's a lovely thing to let that go. Yeah. Wow. Breaking down walls. That's kind of what I see. I love the language of a veil because sometimes it is this very thinly, it's just like a piece of rice paper, like it's just really thin, onion skin paper even, right? Yes. Super thin. And I love this. The point where you're saying you realized you weren't as happy as you could be, as happy as you wanted your clients to be, like you wanted a certain kind of happiness for them, but you weren't having that. And so I think there's some bravery in that, right? And there's that moment of when you start to help women be seen for who they really are, because you said something that was very powerful at the beginning. You said, if we don't allow ourselves to be seen, we're not allowing ourselves to be loved. That is huge. That is, I'm telling you right now, I'm taking that in because I think we all have something that we're kind of guarding, past stuff, some of it present stuff, some people guard their dreams very, so guarded that others can't dream for them and with them, right? So I think that is, there's power in that. This idea of allowing the guard to come down, to be your authentic self, so that other people can, and you said you're able to have deeper connections now that you've allowed yourself to be your authentic self. And I think that's powerful too, because one thing I know that this world, this current society we live in with cell phones and, right, we're so deeply connected to this, right, that we don't make the time and the effort to have deep connections with other people, like face to face. So thank you for saying that in that way, because I think it really does speak to the power of the work that you're trying to do in the world. So how can women connect with you and begin to share their stories and begin to
break down some of those walls and move past the veils that they might have up? How can they do that?
Well, I just started a Facebook group, a Story Circles with Omkari Williams Facebook group. And I'm really excited about it because in my vision for this is a place where women can share their story and just be held by all these other women who really are there to support them. And there's no judgment. It's just, we want to hear who you are. We want to see each other. We want to be seen. And we want to be able to be powerful in this world. And you can't be powerful if you're hiding. There is no power in hiding. There's power in standing in your truth and your beauty and your joy and your love and opening yourself up to more of that. So there's that. And then they can also visit my website, omkariwilliams.com, and connect with me there. And I do a regular blog, and there's all sorts of stuff on the website that they can look at. And I love writing about story and how it connects us. And I have a whole bunch of projects that I have in mind. So they can find out more about some of those there. Some of them are still a secret, but they'll get them.
I love it. I love it. So we will make sure that all the links are down below so that you all can get to all these many places, especially to that Facebook group. And
Instagram. I'm loving Instagram.
Yes.
I'm relatively new to Instagram, but it makes me so happy with just because it's beautiful pictures and there's so much joy in that space. It feels like this incredibly joyful space. So connect with me on Instagram too.
Yeah, absolutely. And Omkari does a beautiful Sunday Stories feature where she features a different woman every Sunday. And so I get a lot of joy out of seeing those. So definitely we will make sure people have all the places where they can connect with you. We'll have a link for the book so they can grab their own playbook and start to create their plan so that they can start to live the life that they most want. Omkari, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us about your book and about what's going on with you and all the beautiful work that you're doing in the world. And thank you for doing this beautiful work in the world.
Oh, well, thank you, Kiala. I mean, it makes me really happy to be able to talk about this. I love what I do, and having the opportunity to share it with you and the people in your community makes me really, really pleased. So thank you.
Thank you. Mwah.